In just 29 seconds, beloved, this morning host Alison Hammond would transform from her signature bubbly self into a confrontational force that left Meghan Markle speechless and viewers across Britain absolutely stunned. What started as light celebrity banter quickly descended into a verbal battleground that would see one of the most explosive on-air meltdowns in daytime television history. The ITV studios felt different that morning. There was an electric tension crackling through the air as production assistants scurried around making final preparations. Meghan Markle, immaculately dressed in a cream-colored blazer, sat rigidly in the guest chair, her publicist hovering nearby with barely concealed anxiety. The Duchess had agreed to this interview as part of her ongoing media rehabilitation tour, expecting the usual softball questions from Hammond's famously gentle approach. Alison bounced onto the set with her trademark energy, but seasoned crew members noticed something different in her demeanor. Her smile seemed more forced than usual, her laugh a touch too bright. She'd spent the previous evening reviewing briefing notes that painted a very different picture of the woman sitting across from her than the one the public had been fed. Right then, Meghan, Alison began, settling into her chair with uncharacteristic seriousness. Lovely to have you back on British television. It's been quite the journey for you, hasn't it? Meghan's media-trained smile flickered slightly. It has, Alison. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share some positive news about our upcoming projects. Oh, we'll get to those, Hammond replied, her tone carrying an edge that made the studio audience shift uncomfortably. But first, I think viewers are curious about something else entirely. See, we've been hearing some interesting stories lately. Stories about how you've been treating staff members, both here in the UK and back in California. The color drained from Meghan's face. This wasn't in the agreed-upon question list. Her publicist took a step forward, but Hammond raised a hand without breaking eye contact with her guest. I'm sorry, what exactly are you referring to? Meghan asked, her voice maintaining its practiced calm despite the obvious tension. Well, let's start with the bullying allegations that Buckingham Palace investigated. The ones involving your treatment of palace staff during your time as a working royal. Multiple employees, Meghan, people who dedicated their careers to serving the crown, reduced to tears by your behavior. Meghan's composure began to crack. Those allegations were thoroughly investigated and… Were they, though? Hammond interrupted, leaning forward with an intensity that had never been seen from the usually jovial presenter. Because, from what I understand, the results of that investigation were conveniently buried, weren't they? Very convenient timing, considering everything else that was happening with your family at the time. The studio fell deadly silent. Camera operators exchanged glances, unsure whether to keep rolling. This was unprecedented territory for this morning. Alison, I came here today to discuss my charitable work and upcoming projects, Meghan said, her voice gaining a sharp edge. I didn't come here to be ambushed with tabloid gossip and unsubstantiated claims. Unsubstantiated? Hammond's voice rose slightly. Are you calling the testimonies of multiple palace employees unsubstantiated? These are people with impeccable service records, Meghan. People who worked for the royal family for decades without a single complaint, suddenly finding themselves in tears after interactions with you. Meghan's hands clenched in her lap. I have always treated staff with respect and kindness. Any suggestion otherwise is simply untrue. Really? Because we've also heard about incidents in Montecito. Former staff members from Archewell speaking anonymously about a toxic work environment. High turnover rates. People walking out without notice. That doesn't sound like the behavior of someone who treats staff with respect and kindness. The audience was captivated, sensing they were witnessing something historic. Hammond's transformation was complete. Gone was the giggling, warm presenter they knew and loved, replaced by a razor-sharp interviewer who seemed determined to get answers. This is absolutely ridiculous, Meghan snapped, her carefully constructed facade finally beginning to crumble. I won't sit here and be accused of things that simply aren't true by someone who clearly has an agenda. An agenda? Hammond laughed. But there was no humor in it. My agenda is the truth, love. My agenda is asking the questions that other interviewers have been too polite or too intimidated to ask. Because, let's be honest, Meghan, you've gotten very comfortable with friendly interviews where no one challenges your version of events. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Meghan shifted in her chair, looking toward her publicist, who appeared frozen in place. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro-expression, every moment of discomfort. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about the nature of this interview," Meghan said coldly. "Oh no, there's no misunderstanding," Hammond replied, her voice steady and controlled. "The misunderstanding is thinking you could come on British television and not be held accountable for your actions. But we're just getting started, aren't we?" The words hung in the air like a threat. Meghan's media training kicked in as she attempted to regain control, but Hammond was relentless, pressing forward with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor. "Let's talk about your Oprah interview," Hammond continued, pulling out a thick folder of notes. "You made some pretty serious accusations that night. Accusations that damaged an entire family's reputation. But here's what's interesting. Several of your claims have since been proven incorrect or, shall we say, exaggerated." Meghan's jaw tightened. "Everything I said in that interview was my truth." "Your truth?" Hammond's eyebrows shot up. "Right. Because apparently we all get to have our own version of truth now, don't we? But let's stick to actual facts for a moment. You claimed you weren't given any help with your mental health struggles. Yet palace records show you were offered access to the royal physicians and the private health care that every working royal receives. That's not the same as... And then there's the matter of Archie's title," Hammond pressed on, not allowing the interruption. "You suggested racism played a role in him not receiving a prince title at birth. But that's not how succession works, is it, Meghan? King Charles III changed those rules this year, but when Archie was born, he wasn't entitled to that title regardless of his race. You knew that, didn't you?" Meghan's composure was rapidly deteriorating. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "The conversations that were had about my son's skin color—" "Ah yes, the mysterious conversations," Hammond interrupted, leaning back with a knowing look. "Conversations that Harry himself later clarified weren't about racism at all, but about what any family might wonder about their grandchild's appearance. Conversations that you and he have since admitted were taken out of context. But the damage was already done, wasn't it?" The studio audience was completely silent, mesmerized by this unprecedented verbal takedown. Several audience members had their phones out, clearly recording what they sensed was television history in the making. "This is character assassination," Meghan hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I came here in good faith." "Good faith?" Hammond laughed bitterly. "Like the good faith you showed when you allowed your friends to brief against Catherine in the press? Or the good faith you showed when you released private text messages between you and your sister-in-law to your biographers?" Meghan's face flushed red. "Those text messages proved that Catherine made me cry, not the other way around." "Did they, though?" Hammond shot back. "Because what those messages actually showed was a very normal misunderstanding between two women trying to navigate a stressful situation. But you turned it into ammunition for your victim narrative, didn't you? And speaking of crying, wasn't it interesting how you managed to produce tears on cue during that Oprah interview, especially when discussing your mental health? How dare you?" Meghan's voice cracked with genuine anger now. "How dare you question my mental health struggles?" "I'm not questioning your mental health," Hammond replied coolly. "I'm questioning your honesty about everything else. Because someone who struggles with mental health doesn't typically spend their time systematically destroying other people's reputations, do they?" The confrontation had escalated beyond anything viewers had ever seen on daytime television. Meghan looked genuinely rattled, her carefully maintained public persona crumbling in real time. Her publicist was now frantically gesturing from the sidelines, clearly wanting to intervene, but unsure how to stop this runaway train. "You know what I find most interesting about all of this?" Hammond continued, clearly just warming up. "You've spent years positioning yourself as this champion of women, this feminist icon. But what have you actually done except tear down other women to build yourself up? Catherine, the Queen Consort, even your own family members. Where's the sisterhood in that, Meghan?" Meghan's eyes flashed with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a pattern of using people for your own advancement and then discarding them when they're no longer useful. Your father, your half-sister, your former friends, the royal family, they all served their purpose until they didn't, right?" The verbal assault was relentless, and Hammond showed no signs of letting up. She had clearly done her homework. and every question was calculated to maximum effect. The usually jovial presenter had transformed into something viewers had never seen before, a formidable interrogator who seemed determined to expose what she saw as years of calculated deception. "This interview is over," Meghan said suddenly, starting to rise from her chair. "Oh no, we're not finished yet," Hammond said firmly, her voice carrying an authority that made Meghan freeze mid-motion. "You wanted to come on British television to rehabilitate your image? Well, let's really talk about what needs rehabilitating, shall we?" Meghan slowly sank back into her chair, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. The studio lights seemed harsher now, illuminating every crack in her composure as Hammond prepared to deliver what would become the most devastating final act in daytime television history. "Let's talk about Harry," Hammond continued, her voice dropping to an almost conversational tone that somehow felt more menacing than her previous aggression. "Because that's really what this is all about, isn't it? You've systematically isolated him from everyone he's ever cared about. His family, his military colleagues, his lifelong friends. Classic manipulation tactics, wouldn't you say?" "That's absolutely untrue," Meghan spat, but her voice lacked conviction. "Harry made his own choices." "Did he? Because the Harry that Britain knew and loved, the Harry who served his country with honor, who had close relationships with his brother and father, that Harry disappeared pretty quickly after he met you, didn't he?" Hammond's words cut like surgical instruments. "And now he sits in California, cut off from everything that once mattered to him, reduced to telling his family's private business to anyone willing to pay for it." The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row leaned forward, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Camera operators continued filming, capturing every moment of what was rapidly becoming a career-defining interrogation. "You know what's really tragic?" Hammond pressed on relentlessly. "Harry was genuinely loved by the British people. He was the cheeky prince, the war hero, the one who brought joy and spontaneity to the royal family. And you've turned him into a bitter, resentful man who can't stop complaining about the very institution that gave him purpose and meaning." Meghan's hands were shaking now, her carefully applied makeup beginning to show stress lines. "Harry is happier now than he's ever been. Is he? Because he doesn't look happy in those recent photos, does he? He looks tired, stressed, older than his years. And those Netflix documentaries, that book, they don't read like the words of a happy man, Meghan. They read like the words of someone who's been convinced to burn every bridge he's ever had." "You have no right," Meghan began, but Hammond was far from finished. "And let's talk about the business ventures, shall we? Spotify dropped you after just one series. Netflix is reportedly unhappy with the content you've delivered. Your Archwell Foundation has raised questions about where exactly the money goes. Everything you touch seems to turn to shit, doesn't it?" The profanity hit like a slap. Meghan recoiled as if she'd been physically struck, her media training finally abandoning her completely. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she shrieked, her American accent becoming more pronounced as her composure completely shattered. "I am a duchess." "You're a duchess of nothing," Hammond fired back, rising from her chair with passion blazing in her eyes. "You abandoned the role that came with that title the moment it required actual work and service. You wanted the glamour and the attention, but none of the responsibility. And when you realized you couldn't turn the monarchy into your personal Hollywood production, you threw your toys out of the pram and ran back to California." The confrontation had reached a fever pitch. Meghan was openly weeping now. But they weren't the controlled tears of her Oprah interview. These were raw, ugly tears of someone who had been completely exposed. "You're nothing but a failed actress who got lucky enough to marry into the most famous family in the world. And you've spent every day since then trying to destroy them because they wouldn't let you monetize their brand," Hammond continued, her voice carrying the weight of years of suppressed British frustration with the couple's behavior. Meghan shot to her feet, her chair clattering backward. "I don't have to listen to this bullshit." "No, you don't," Hammond agreed, sitting back down with satisfaction. "You can walk out of here just like you walked out on your royal duties, your family obligations, and every other commitment you've ever made. But the truth will still be the truth, whether you're here to hear it or not." "Fuck this," Meghan screamed, shocking the audience with her language. "And fuck all of you. You never wanted me to succeed because I'm American, because I'm biracial, because I threatened your precious little system." Hammond shook her head sadly. "We never wanted you to fail, Meghan. We wanted you to succeed. Britain was ready to embrace you, to celebrate you. You could have been extraordinary in that role. But instead, you chose to play victim, to tear down an institution that survived for over 1,000 years because it wouldn't bend to your demands." Meghan was backing toward the exit now, her publicist finally rushing forward to escort her away. But she turned back one final time, her face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this," she snarled at Hammond. "All of you will regret this." "The only thing I regret," Hammond replied calmly, "is that it took this long for someone to finally tell you the truth." With that, Meghan Markle stormed off the This Morning set, leaving behind a stunned audience and a host who had just delivered the most devastating takedown in British television history. Hammond sat quietly for a moment, collecting herself, before turning back to the cameras with a slight smile. "Well," she said, her familiar warmth returning to her voice, "that was interesting, wasn't it? When we come back after the break, we'll be talking about the best plants for your autumn garden." The credits began to roll as the audience erupted in applause, and television history was made.